Okay, learner. So today we're going to dive into a really, really dark case. Um, you ready for this one? It's the story of Daniel Marsh.
Yeah, this is I mean, honestly one of the more unsettling cases I've ever looked into.
Yeah, so to be clear right up front, our main source here is this YouTube documentary transcript, and it is jam-packed with intense stuff. Like, we've got the actual police interviews, statements from the victim's family, and even some pretty creepy correspondence with Marsh himself.
Yeah, I mean the goal here, right, is to kind of try to wrap our heads around this whole thing, Like what could lead someone seemingly normal, especially someone so young, down this incredibly dark path. We're talking like brutal violence here.
Right, and we're going to unpack all of it,
Yeah.
the warning signs, the interrogation, how the trial went down, the impact on everyone involved.
And to be honest, even with all this information, I'm not sure we'll have an easy answer.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, this is definitely one of those cases where understanding why is going to be the biggest challenge. So, okay, where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think starting with Daniel's childhood is really important. It kind of sets the stage. And right away, we hit this huge contradiction.
Oh, yeah.
This kid at 12 years old, right? He saves his father's life like a genuine hero.
Wow.
Yeah, they were driving. His dad had some kind of medical emergency, and Daniel managed to, like, I don't know, pull over or something and get help. It's incredible. But then just 3 years later, when he's 15, this completely different picture emerges, a picture of, like, intense, violent thoughts, fantasies, just real darkness.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a twisted juxtaposition, right? Like, how can someone be capable of this incredible act of heroism and then harbor these really disturbing thoughts?
And the thing is, he's very open about these thoughts in the interrogation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he describes them as intrusive, vivid, and violent. I mean, he even talks about wanting to kill the interviewer. Like, he's sitting right there with him, and he says things like choking you to death with your tie and, even beating her face into the mirror until it broke.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, those words alone are chilling. And you try to reconcile that with the kid who saved his father's life, and it's just impossible to even fathom.
Right, and then you start to dig into his childhood, and yeah, it's definitely complicated. Yeah, the transcript gives some context there, right?
Oh, yeah. So his parents split up when he was younger, and his mom left to be with her former kindergarten teacher.
Seriously.
Yeah, and Daniel clearly feels incredibly resentful about this.
Yeah.
He sees it as a selfish act.
Right.
His mom putting her own happiness above the well-being of her kids. It really seems like a pretty significant disruption to his emotional development.
It makes you wonder about that early sense of security, Like, did he ever feel safe and loved unconditionally? And his dad?
Well, the sources don't explicitly mention any physical abuse towards Daniel or his sister, but there are hints of instability.
Okay.
Like, his dad was obviously upset about the breakup and reportedly had a temper. Apparently, he'd take his frustrations out on objects, not people, but still creates this unsettling environment.
Right, a lot of unspoken tension. Yeah, and one FBI agent in the interview even refers to the family as a family train wreck, which, I mean, might sound harsh, but
No, I think it's spot on.
yeah, it kind of sums it up, right? And Daniel himself even adds to this picture, He describes his older sister in really negative terms. He calls her attention-seeking, a habitual liar, a manipulator, all this stuff.
Whoa.
So it's not just that he was passively experiencing this chaotic family life. He was actively observing, judging, almost developing this like cynical, detached view of everyone around him.
Like he thought he had everyone figured out.
Exactly. And maybe that contributed to this sense of superiority, this isolation. It's like he could analyze others but couldn't connect with them.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous combination, isn't it?
And-
Especially for someone who's already struggling. So, okay, let's talk about the interrogation because, I mean, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's honestly like watching a masterclass in deception, at least at first.
Oh, yeah.
In the beginning, right, Marsh plays the innocent bystander perfectly. His answers are super vague, his memory's all selective, especially when it comes to the weekend of the murders. He just throws out these general statements like, I should have been at my house, probably playing video games. There's zero specifics about what he was doing.
Like he's intentionally leaving things out right.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is you start noticing these subtle behavioral cues, things that experienced investigators are trained to pick up on.
Like what?
Well, for example, they describe his body language as remarkably still, which you might think, okay, that means he's calm. But it could also mean that he's using so much mental energy to construct this narrative that he can't even move naturally. It's not genuine.
Wow.
And then there's the fidgeting, the constant need to drink water, classic signs of anxiety, right? Like he's trying so hard to appear composed, but His body betrays him.
It's like he's fighting himself.
Absolutely. And even his words, he uses these phrases like, I don't really know anything else, or I haven't heard anything about me in regards to that.
Limiting what he knows, deflecting.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's trying to distance himself from the crime, reinforce this story that's probably falling apart even as he's telling it.
It's like he's trying to convince himself as much as the investigators.
Right. And then comes the blame shifting, a total classic deflection tactic.
He brings up John Doe.
Yeah, this supposed friend who he claims is an animal abuser and the one who reported him for carrying a knife.
As if that justifies anything.
And the really chilling part is how casually he talks about this alleged animal cruelty. I mean, there's even a mention of a slight smile and some soft chuckles when the death of a cat is attributed to John Doe.
That's disturbing.
Right? Like, where's the appropriate emotional response to something so awful? Total red flag.
Absolutely. Then we get to the part where they actually accuse him of the murders, and it's just as unsettling.
Instead of outrage or shock, right?
Right.
There's this fake smile, almost a freeze response.
Like he wasn't expecting it at all.
And he never actually denies it outright. He just keeps saying things like, I care about people. Like he's trying to prove he's a good guy before they can label him a monster.
So calculated.
Yeah, and none of it feels genuine. Then they start digging into his Tumblr account, and this is where the mask really starts to slip.
Oh, yeah, that's where we get to see his true colors.
Right, like he tries to portray himself as this compassionate, affectionate person, but his online activity tells a totally different story, a much darker story.
Full of horror, gore, human anatomy.
Exactly. And his explanation for this obsession is truly chilling. He basically equates it to watching a horror movie. It's real, but he doesn't have any connection to the victim, so it doesn't bother him.
Detachment, pure and simple.
And they even mention him laughing at graphic content, which, some people might say is a coping mechanism, a way to regulate intense emotions.
Well, but even with that explanation, it's disturbing.
Oh, absolutely. And there are inconsistencies, Like at one point, they're discussing specific anatomical details, and they note that he shifts his posture like he's uncomfortable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so maybe that detachment isn't as complete as he wants them to believe. Then the investigators bring up these rumors, specific details about the crime that haven't been released publicly.
The stuff only the killer would know.
Exactly. And Marsh tries to offer an alibi, saying he was probably home with his mom, but come on.
That's weak.
Totally. And I think at this point, the FBI agent realizes he needs to change his approach. So he starts to frame the crime as a compulsion, like something Marsh couldn't control.
Playing on his potential mental instability.
Exactly. Maybe hoping that Marsh will feel understood and open up.
And of course, Marsh being Marsh tries to manipulate that too.
Oh, yeah. He's always comparing himself to John Doe, emphasizing his own clean record, trying to distance himself from the violence.
And what about the animal abuse thing? Did he ever admit to that?
He denies ever hurting animals intentionally. But he does admit to hitting his dog when he gets angry.
Seriously?
Yeah, so you can see there's this warped understanding of what intentional harm actually means. Another red flag.
For sure. Then there's that part where they discuss punishment, like what might happen to him.
Right, and this is classic Reed technique,
Yeah.
They're trying to see how he reacts.
And how does he react?
Well, he immediately focuses on his clean record, again, trying to differentiate himself from John Doe. It's clear he's still trying to present this image of someone who would never be capable of such a horrible act.
But the FBI agent doesn't let up.
No, he keeps pointing out the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and he starts directly linking Marsh's online interests to the crime scene.
And how's Marsh holding up during all this?
Well, they repeatedly mention his incredibly still body language. It's like he's putting all his energy into maintaining this facade, this carefully constructed persona. And then there's this tiny moment, but it's huge. The agent mentions the idea of violence being linked to feeling alive, and Marsh gives this almost imperceptible nod, like he can't help himself.
Well, as a subconscious slip.
And they also note an increase in his blink rate, which is another sign of anxiety. So yeah, the pressure is definitely getting to him.
Yeah, they're starting to break through his defenses. And then there's that chilling moment where Marsh actually interrupts the agent.
Oh, yeah, I remember this. He calls the crime a masterpiece.
Does he really?
Yeah, I mean, he immediately tries to backpedal, but the fact that he even registers that compliment, that's disturbing.
Absolutely. And then he starts blaming his messed up life, his exposure to dark content.
Right, but he still avoids directly denying the act itself.
And they mention nervous laughter, his voice getting softer.
Yeah, it's like he's losing control a little bit.
So then they start talking about his mental health history, right?
Yeah, he reveals that he was diagnosed with depression as a child and that he's currently taking an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medication, and a mood stabilizer.
Wow, that's a lot.
It really points to a long and complex mental health struggle. And throughout this whole discussion, his effect is described as flat. So it's really hard to tell what's genuine, what's medication, and what's just part of his act.
Then he mentions having a mental break in the past.
Yeah. Apparently he felt unsafe, was having thoughts of harming himself or others, and ended up hospitalized. But he claims that his outlook on life has improved since then.
Okay, but the FBI agent isn't buying it.
No, he keeps coming back to the idea that maybe the murders were a way for Marsh to feel something, to escape his own emptiness.
A twisted kind of refuge.
Exactly. And then he calls Marsh out directly about his body language. How it contradicts what he's saying.
And how does Marsh take that?
Well, he suddenly gets really angry when they confront him about lying about breaking into his ex-girlfriend's house. It's like that's the lie that really gets to him.
Interesting. So what happens next?
Well, he makes this desperate plea to be sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of jail.
Trying to avoid responsibility.
Then immediately denies being psychotic, even though he just admitted to having a mental break. It's all very chaotic and contradictory.
Yeah, sounds like classic manipulation.
Yeah.
But the FBI agent keeps pushing right.
He's incredibly patient, and you can tell he's using all the right techniques to build rapport. Understand Marsh's motivations. He even frames a confession as a form of self-help.
Wow, that's clever.
Yeah, and finally it works. Marsh breaks down and admits to having homicidal thoughts since he was 10 years old.
10 years old? That's terrifying.
And these early thoughts were directed towards his mother's partner, which, adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Right. It's like this pattern of violence has been brewing for years. And it just keeps escalating from there.
Exactly. He describes how the thoughts became more frequent, more intense, and eventually started to include almost everyone, even his own family.
It's just horrifying to think about.
Yeah.
It's interesting is he makes a distinction between having these thoughts and wanting to act on them.
Yeah, he acknowledges how disturbing the thoughts are, but claims that he never actually wanted to hurt anyone, at least not at first.
But then he says something that's even more chilling.
Yeah, he believes that he could be treated for the thoughts themselves, but not for his lack of empathy.
Like he knows something is fundamentally wrong with him.
And he claims that he lost his empathy around 14 years old, which is just heartbreaking and terrifying all at the same time.
Wow, and then he says that he's been researching psychopathy and sociopathy.
Right, and that he identifies with those traits more and more. It's like he's becoming the monster he's reading about.
And the worst part is this conflict he describes, this part of him that wants to hurt and kill, battling with the part that doesn't want those things.
It's a glimpse into this really fractured mind, right? Someone struggling with their own darkness.
So after all this, after he breaks down his defenses, how does he describe the actual murders?
It's cold and detached. There's no remorse. He admits that he went out that night with the specific intention to kill someone. He just started wandering around South Davis looking for an easy target.
And he ends up at the Northup residence. Why?
Well, he claims he was drawn to what he thought was an unlocked door or actually a loose flap in the screen.
Like that's all it took.
And he describes watching the sleeping couple, feeling this mix of nerves and excitement, exhilaration. It's just so disturbing to imagine.
And then the stabbings, how does he describe that?
Brutal and completely unemotional. He says he started with Claudia, then Chip woke up, so he attacked him, and then went back to Claudia because she wouldn't die. I mean, it's just pure savagery.
And there's that detail about him using his phone for light while he's stabbing them.
Yeah, even after they were likely already dead, it's like he couldn't stop himself. It speaks to this complete disregard for human life.
And then Claudia begs him to stop, and he laughs.
That's right. Just pure apathy, no empathy whatsoever. And later, he significantly underestimates the number of times he stabbed them. He says, 20 or 30 times each, but the actual count was way higher.
He was so detached from reality, it's insane. And then he talks about mutilating the bodies.
Yeah, he describes opening their torsos, placing a cell phone inside Claudia and a cup inside Chip.
Oh my God, why?
He says he wanted to throw them off, make the scene look weird, like he was trying to be clever.
Unbelievable. And he doesn't stop there. He keeps cutting them, even on Chip's forehead.
And he calls it exploration, curiosity, like he's experimenting on their bodies. It's just sickening.
Yeah, and the most disturbing part of all, he describes punching the victims after they were already dead.
And he says it felt amazing, pure happiness and adrenaline, like he got off on it.
This guy is a monster.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he was planning to do it again.
Oh, yeah. He talks about his dreams of killing, how they progressed from strangers to people he knew, and he even outlines plans for future attacks. He imagined himself alone at night with a baseball bat.
So they caught him just in time.
It's terrifying to think what could have happened if they hadn't. So thankfully, the evidence against him was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, like what did they find?
Well, his clothes were covered in blood, and they found that buck knife exactly where he said it would be.
The one from Scream.
Yeah, and his shoes had tape on the soles, which matched the theory that the killer was trying to avoid leaving footprints.
Clever, but not clever enough. And his phone records placed him at the scene too, right?
Absolutely. But the real smoking gun was the audio recording that his ex-girlfriend and a friend made.
Oh yeah, they secretly recorded him confessing.
It was incredibly brave of them. I mean, they knew he was dangerous, but they did the right thing, and it provided irrefutable proof of his guilt.
And what prompted them to go to the police?
Well, there was a 911 call from an anonymous informant, someone close to Marsh, who was really concerned. He'd been confessing to people making threats, and this person thankfully decided to speak up.
Good for them. I mean, they probably saved lives. And the ex-girlfriend and friend, they testified at the trial too, right?
They did. It must have been incredibly difficult for them, but they told the court everything about Marsh's disturbing past, his violent fantasies, and his cruelty towards animals going way back to when he was 10.
It's amazing that anyone could stay silent knowing all that. So let's talk about the victims, Oliver Northup and Claudia Maupin.
Yeah, their stories are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Chip was 87 years old, a World War II veteran, a lawyer, just a really stand-up guy. He was known for being honest and a stickler for the rules.
A good man.
And Claudia was 76, a political activist and a spiritual counselor. She was described as endlessly kind and supportive. Just a beautiful soul.
It's amazing that they found each other later in life.
It's a really sweet story, actually. They met through their church directory. Claudia used to joke that she found Chip in the Man catalog.
Yeah.
They both had previous marriages, but they were so happy together.
Oh, that's so sad. So their families, I mean, they must have been completely devastated.
Absolutely. It's clear from the interviews and statements that the shock and grief were just overwhelming. You know, they noticed Chip and Claudia weren't at church, and the phone calls went unanswered, and then the discovery of that broken window. I mean, can you imagine?
It's just unimaginable. And Claudia's daughter, Victoria, she talks about how traumatic it was to get that news and then to have the media all over them. It's just too much.
And Chip's son, Robert, he went through something truly awful. On top of everything else, he was initially considered a suspect. Yeah, they searched his home, questioned him, put the whole family through this extra layer of hell. And then there was this drawing that his young son had made that the police misinterpreted as evidence.
Oh, God, so much unnecessary pain.
It just shows how easily suspicion can twist things, even the most innocent things. The crime itself was so brutal that they had to do special preparation for Claudia's body just to have an open casket at her funeral.
That's just heartbreaking. But Victoria was adamant about remembering her mother as the vibrant, loving person she was.
Right. She wanted the focus to be on Claudia's life, not just her death, which is incredibly strong and inspiring. And Claudia's granddaughter, Sarah, she talks about how disturbing it was to see Daniel Marsh's family at the trial.
What do you mean?
Well, while his father was pretty stoic, some of the younger family members were apparently acting inappropriately, like almost mocking the situation. And they even wore free Daniel shirts.
Wow, that's a whole other level of messed up. It makes you wonder what kind of environment he was really surrounded by.
Yeah, for sure. And Victoria, she showed incredible restraint in the courtroom, you know, when she saw Marsh face to face. And Marsh's ex-girlfriend, she expresses so much guilt for not going to the police sooner.
Like she blames herself.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden to carry, knowing that you could have potentially prevented something so horrible. And Chip's son, Robert, he's understandably frustrated with the system. You know, Marsh had brought a knife to school. He talked about he'd killed a raccoon.
Wally's son.
And no one intervened effectively. So yeah, there's definitely a sense that this tragedy could have been prevented.
So what happened legally?
Well, because of the severity of the crime, Marsh was tried as an adult. But later on, California changed its juvenile sentencing laws, and Marsh's lawyers filed a bunch of appeals.
Oh, so he might get out early.
It's possible, but ultimately those appeals were unsuccessful, mostly because of the timing of his original sentencing.
Okay, so he's still in prison, but what about this TED Talk he gave?
Oh yeah, that was a whole thing. It was called Embracing Our Humanity. And he basically claimed that he'd found the value of human connection while he was incarcerated.
Trying to act remorseful.
Right, but it turns out that around the same time, he was allegedly getting these really disturbing tattoos that depicted the crime scene.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so it kind of throws his whole sincerity into question. Like, was the TED Talk just another manipulation tactic?
Seems likely that TED Talk's been taken down now, right?
It has. And despite all his appeals to the California Supreme Court, his original sentence of 52 years to life is still in place.
So he's not getting out anytime soon?
Well, not exactly. Because he was a juvenile when he committed the murders, he's actually eligible for parole in 2037.
Oh, wow. That's not that far away.
It's definitely something that the victims' families are worried about, understandably.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And did Marsh himself have anything to say about all this? Like in the documentary?
He declined to participate. He said he didn't want to resurface suffering for everyone involved.
What a load of crap.
It's pretty ironic considering how hard he's fighting to get out of prison. But there is some interesting correspondence with his fiancée, Catalina Escolar.
His fiancée? He has a fiancée.
Yeah, apparently they maintained this relationship despite him being locked up, which is strange to say the least. And then when she found out about the TED Talk, she ended their relationship completely.
Makes you wonder what their connection really was. Like maybe they knew each other before the murders.
There's definitely some unanswered questions there. So unlike Marsh Claudia's daughter Victoria, she decided to share her family's story.
Yeah, good for her.
She's committed to making sure that Chip and Claudia are remembered for the amazing people they were, not just as victims.
That takes strength. Okay, so as we wrap up this incredibly disturbing deep dive, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, we've seen firsthand just how complex and often incomprehensible extreme violence can be, how easy it is to miss or dismiss warning signs, how terrifying the reality of psychopathy is, and the truly devastating impact that these crimes have on families and communities.
And this brings us to a really unsettling question. So Daniel Marsh, right, he scored incredibly high on measures of psychopathy, and he's had these homicidal thoughts since he was a child. So with the possibility of parole in 2037, I mean, are we really equipped to deal with someone like that?
Right. Can someone like that ever truly be rehabilitated? And what does it mean for society if he is released? It's terrifying.
This whole case forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about evil, about our ability to predict and prevent it. And honestly, I'm not sure we have any easy answers.
It's definitely a case that stays with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.